What is your name?
Anna.
Anya?
Anya in Russian.
Ah,
Anna.
Anna. Anya. Have we met before, Anya? No?
I only read your books.
You've read my books? Or?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. In Russian or in English?
In English.
Uh-huh.
I've seen you plan to go to Russia, right?
I go to Russia twice a year,
Oh,
and for the last 10 years or so, I go to Moscow and St. Petersburg and Ekaterinburg. Sorry for the pronunciation.
Oh, no. Good. They need you there.
So how is it you find yourself here tonight, Anya?
I'm a big reader,
Yes.
read a lot, and just recently, a few months ago, I stumbled upon your books.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember which way.
Uh-huh.
And I love the message. It resonates,
Uh-huh.
but doesn't go through. I don't know. I agree intellectually, but I'm still tortured by all decisions and guilt and fear.
So did you find that any of the pointers in the books helped you to understand what the root of this guilt and the fear might be?
It helps to relieve the burden a little bit, and not maybe push for results, but be more accepting of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe accept that this is the way and how it's supposed to be. And but it kind of goes back and forth.
Yes, the flip-flop, as my guru Ramesh described it. And the way I see it and understand it is it's really a expansion and a contraction. And the contraction is into the sense of being a independent entity. And the expansion is into the recognition of oneself as being part of this expanded or this expansion. And so it is this movement which is the movement of the spiritual seeker. And obviously when there is the expansion, the general sensation is one of relief to a degree, of openness, of connectedness, presence. And then as the contraction happens, that feeling of being independent has a sense of being isolated, and from that isolation comes the fear and the guilt. Because when you are isolated, then all that you do is a product of this isolated being. As the expansion happens, all that you do then is understood to be a function of that which you truly are as an expanded self. So this process, and it is very much a process. Once the seeking begins, it is very much a process. And the intellectual understanding, of course, is part of the process. But as you alluded to, as you well know, it is not by any means the end point in the process. But it isn't, as far as I'm concerned, is not to be rejected or denied, that intellectual understanding. It has its own value. But the value that it has, of course, is limited. So the recognition that it is limited doesn't necessarily mean it is without value.
There is a strong urge to push it through, to speed it up.
Yes. And that strong, and the more contracted you are, the stronger the urge to speed it up and to push it is. Because the pushing is a function of the contraction. It comes with the territory of that contraction. Now, I would say that the pushing is different from the desire. The desire for the expansion comes automatically in the contraction. You want that back. You want the peace back. You want the ease back. You want the comfort back. That is the most natural response that there can be, to have that desire. Very human. But it is the feeling that it is up to me to make my desire a reality. That's where the pushing comes. It's up to me. And the lingering, the suspicion that I somehow have the power to do so. That within me, inherently, is the power to bring this about a little bit faster.
Yeah, maybe there is some door that I just haven't found yet.
Exactly. You haven't tried quite hard enough, or you haven't unlocked the seventh secret.
Also, sometimes I worry that it's just a clever way to avoid responsibility.
Yes. Well, you're not alone there. That is probably the most common reaction by what I call the sense of authorship, the claim of authorship. In the expansion, in the recognition that it is the universe that is functioning, that is assessed by the closed, limited self as a cop-out, as a abdication of responsibility. Because the closed, limited self's whole rationale for being is to take credit, to take responsibility. So in your reading, have you read one book or more than one book, or have you?
I read all of them.
You've read all of them? Okay.
Just feels that, you know, it kind of goes deeper when you keep repeating it, and I also love to read, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So in the reading of the books, was anything left unclear for you, or did it leave you with any questions that I can perhaps help you with?
I found these two books, and I don't have enough cash with me. Do you accept credit cards?
We'll work something out. We have very easy credit terms around here. As in, send it in whenever. Not to worry. If you come back, put it in the basket. If you don't come back, send it in. If you don't send it in, don't worry about it.
I think I'll come again and just bring money.
Okay.
Can I ask, do you meditate?
Not in a formal sense any longer. I did a formal meditation practice for a while. I did several different ones. But I don't have any formal practices.
You don't recommend any?
I don't recommend anything, but I don't recommend against anything. So if you are drawn to a particular practice, then by all means, do it. And then see what happens. See whether it's valuable for you, or you find maybe valuable for a while and then it ceases being valuable. So particularly in depending on, there's so many different kinds of meditation practices, but a lot of meditation practices are simply a matter of bringing one's attention to the moment. And that's almost always productive if you can do it. Because when you bring your attention to the moment is not a fixed object. You know, we call it the moment, but the moment is this vast, rich field in which all kinds of stuff is happening. So another term for that is to be present for what is happening here. And that presence is expansive in nature. And curiously, when the sense of authorship, if you will, gets involved with the practice, it often gets very focused. So that the practice is now objectified. This is how you have to do it. This is what must be accomplished here. And it gets very specific and rigid. But absent of that, then most practices have, in their essence, a very expansive quality to them.
Were you able to reach those states of concentration they talk about, like Gihana, and was it important in your process?
It was, I hesitate to ascribe importance to these things. I had various states and various experiences, and developed various skills. But ultimately, that was not, I mean, for me, is not the point. Those things happened along the way, and they had their own benefits and detriments. But none of them are essentially crucial. When I say essentially crucial, they may have been crucial to me along my path. All of the things that happened were absolutely crucial. But that doesn't extend out to them being crucial for anybody else. And that is why I don't recommend anything in particular for people other than that which grabs your interest and your attention and your energy. There's a guy, Joseph Campbell, he had a phrase, follow your bliss, which has kind of a nice ring to it. Basically, if you're attracted to it, if it feels important to you, then do it.
What?
If you can. And that's the caveat on all of these things. If you can. And if you can't, then the understanding is that you simply can't do it in that moment. Not from your own failing, not from your own lack of effort or trying, but simply it was not part of what is in that moment. So if you can, do it. What is your name?
Lynn.
Lynn.
Mm.
Have we met before, Lynn?
No.
Let's see. So how is it that you're here tonight?
I don't know, a few days ago I found you on YouTube. You came up on YouTube and I watched it and it resonated.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw that you were in LA.
Mm-hmm.
Check them out. Check it out.
I see. So what was it about the video that you saw that resonated with you? Can you put your finger on it? What it was?
Yes. Well, I like because I've been doing Advaita for a long time. Vedanta, for a long time. And more recently, like looking into the sense of being the doer, the being, the what you call having that sense of
Authorship. Mm-hmm.
Authorship.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't see it like, the doer, whatever. And then saying, that's still really there, So, and I was watching, so then, Roger Castillo came up I was watching his. He was Ramesh's student, and I was watching his videos, and then I thought they were interesting with his ideas, but I resonated more with you where you, because Roger didn't talk so much about the essence, the awareness being the substratum, being what is, and the phenomenon, or this, whatever this is, it's one thing, but they're, yeah. So the way you put it, I like that, the way you, and it just totally made sense.
Was there anything that you were unclear about that I was talking about, or any?
No, really, no. It's just a matter of I wanted to be around you because I think that the more I'm around it, the more it will just sink in, and the more it will be happening. That it'll just be happening.
I call this the living teaching of Advaita, because I am concerned with the living energy that is within the teaching, much more than the concepts and that the teaching is composed of. And so, but that said, I also am very grateful and interested in the concepts. I mean,
because they point you there.
They are pointers.
Yeah.
And they do have, I've found over the years, to be, sometimes very potent.
Right.
But there is a quality of this expansion or presence that if you are resonant with it, if you connect to it, is very impactful. It has nothing much to do with the
concepts.
The concepts.
Yeah. It just is felt. It just is.
It is. And that isness, which is here, is like an antidote or a counterbalance to the weight of contraction that is part of living in the society, living in a world that is very much based on what you're being responsible for it. It's up to you. And that kind of rigid, focused energy is quite prevalent. So to counter that, to find a place in which the counterbalance is the consciousness of the space, is not only rare, but when you can find it, it can be quite powerful in its impact on bringing about that very expansion which we're talking about. So here we are. And you're most welcome.
Thank you.
And what is your name?
Stephanie?
Stephanie?
Yeah.
Hello, Stephanie.
Hi.
Have we met before?
No, it's first time.
And how do you find yourself here tonight, Stephanie?
Oh, him.
Him.
Yeah, him.
Yeah,
I talk about Ramesh that I read all of his books and all of his videos on YouTube, like Ramesh, and he said, "Oh, I had a person from Ramesh. He lives like 20 minutes from you," and I was like, "What?" And here I am.
Wow. And so you've read, I can't possibly have read all of Ramesh's books.
Yeah, I mean, not
1,000.
all. Yeah, of course. I watched all his videos on YouTube, like all that I could find.
Right.
And I read like Confusion No More, or then some books that, of course, I know. And I was very drawn to Ramesh. I could like understand the little dots that I was not catching with him.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah. But I have a question.
Please.
What was the exact moment that the teaching became a living in your daily basis? Like it was not a concept anymore.
So, yeah. When was it for me, you mean?
Yeah.
When? It was March of 1989. Or it was, I don't even remember the date, it's written down somewhere. But at that point, that the teaching was no longer a exterior thing. It was simply what is, and along with me and everything else, we could say.
But of course, you did nothing, right? You was not doing something specific.
At that moment,
Yeah, you
at that precise instant, at that precise instant, the second of two women that I was in love with had just come and told me that she could no longer be with me because it wasn't possible for her to be in a relationship like that. After the other one had done it like the day before. And so it was exactly at that moment, it was that which was the quote trigger for this crash of the false sense of authorship, that sense of being a separate, independent entity. Just died. It's as spiritual as I get. Great.
And did you met Ramesh many times?
Prior to that, I had spent 2 years intensely connected to Ramesh. I was editing and publishing his books. I was organizing his tours to the United States. I was very deeply and profoundly connected to him at virtually every level.
When did he first come to the States?
His first talk was September 16th, 1987, at the Scottish Rite Auditorium in Wilshire Boulevard.
And then he went to Henry's pretty quick after that.
And I mean, Henry brought him here, and he was the one responsible for getting him out of India for the first time.
Can you tell us something about his background? I know that other things.
Whose background?
Ramesh's.
A
little bit.
Very briefly, he was born a Brahmin, and he was educated at the London School of Economics. He returned to India afterwards and began work at a fairly low level in the Bank of India, and quickly rose through the ranks, and finally, when he retired as the president of the bank. So he was quite a meteoric riser. And he was a family man. He had 3 children. And he was, as a young man, a physical culturist, which is a bodybuilder, but not in the way that people build their bodies today into, you know, Hulk-like thing. It was physical culture was, the ideal was to shape the body into the ideal form of the Greco-Roman statue and to sculpt the body. And his body, he did that. I mean, he was a small man, but perfectly proportioned, beautiful physical specimen. He was a scratch golfer. He was a very accomplished and intelligent man. And when he retired, he renewed his interest in non-dual spirituality that he had put on hold basically to take care of his family and life responsibilities. And quickly after he retired, met his guru, Nisargadatta Maharaj. And because of his unique abilities, Nisargadatta Maharaj was a Marathi speaker. Ramesh spoke fluent Marathi as well as extremely good English. And he was served as one of Nisargadatta's translators for several years. Until during one Diwali day talk, that sense of authorship died in him, and he subsequently became a teacher in his own right. So that's the Ramesh synopsis.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I just really want to clarify this whole independence thing.
Right.
Whenever I think of independence, I think of it in terms of like influence and movement. So it's like I feel independent from that statue because that statue can't influence me or has no effect on my movement or my being. So in that case, I feel independent from the statue and, you know, any object seemingly insignificant.
Right, you do not depend upon that statue. That's independent, not dependent upon. But you are separate from it.
I am separate from it.
Right. So we do make the distinction between being separate and being independent.
Wait. How am I not independent? How am I dependent with it?
Well, I'm not using the statue. You are independent of the statue, in the sense that you are not dependent upon the statue for your beingness.
For anything.
For anything, perhaps. Right. So
Unless
you
I-
could possibly be independent of the statue. The question is, can you be independent, period? In your essence, can you be independent? As what you are, can you be independent? That's the question. Meaning not dependent upon anything.
But there are some things I can be independent from.
Yes,
Or
but
it's not.
we're not concerned with. When we talk about being, when we say that, we ask the question, are you independent? We're talking fundamentally. We're talking in your essence, are you independent? Not in a particular circumstance. Are you at root independent, or are you dependent, meaning connected? If you are independent, you are not connected. So that's the question.
I feel the presence of awareness a lot stronger now. Is that,
What do you mean by that?
it's like a feeling of being aware. It's kind of like an airy substance.
Okay. That's what we were talking about before. This expansion
Right.
is what was often called awareness, expanded awareness.
Right.
Yes. And it has an airy, open
Right.
kind of quality. Yes.
Yes. So that's announcing itself a little stronger than it has.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think is that the thing through which we're all connected?
Well, that's what the teaching is encouraging you to look into. What is that? This awareness.
Yeah, I've been doing that.
Good.
So, when you talk about the expansion and the contraction, can they both exist at the same time?
Not really. I mean, not have it have any meaning. I mean, expansion and contraction, in order for the terms to have any meaning, to be pointing to something, they're pointing to two different things.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's just that these past couple of days, there are certain emotions, like energetic contractions, that I typically be caught up in.
Right.
But it's almost like I can actually see them from an expanded place. That's been my experience, even today.
That's what I would call expansion.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, there's always contractions, but the expansion is that you are, quote, witnessing the contractions as simply part of what is. It's part of the vastness, the whole picture. That's the expansion. And all this is playing out in its various ways, and
Is there a quality of peace to the expansion? Like, reliable?
generally, yes.
Generally.
I mean, that is a term that I would reliably ascribe to the expansion.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes it's peace and sometimes it feels more like apathy. Like meh. If that makes sense.
I would say the meh is the reaction, the contracted reaction to the expansion.
Okay.
Is
So that's just me coming back.
yes,
Into
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I would characterize that.
Yeah, on the morning.
What is your name again? I forgot. Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hi. On the morning after Memorial Day, May 29th, I got a call at work that my wife had a heart attack and died in front of our house.
Oh,
And it was,
very sorry.
it was like it was just, it's so tragic, you know, and so immediate. But at the same time, I became extremely present, and it was like a calmness and awareness like I never experienced before. It took that kind of, you know, after many years of seeking everything, it took that kind of experience like, wow, it didn't seem real, you know, but then there was such clarity and peace that lasted for quite a while. Kind of sad, tragic, positive, you know, the two came together, you know.
Right.
So, yeah. I'm sure.
I would say that that is not uncommon, that in a very shocking situation, and something that is emotionally very powerful or physically very powerful, like near-death experiences, you know, and confrontation with the death of a loved one, especially when it's immediate and shocking. These kinds of things are quite they're shattering.
Yeah.
You know, they shatter the structure, the carefully built up structure, and in that shattering of the structure, there is that expansion we're talking about. That's the space, and
But you became really aware of the fragility of life, you know, and it can go.
I'd say you become aware. Period.
Yeah.
I mean, you then attach it to the fragility of life and other things, but it is in fact a expanded awareness.
Yeah.
And as we were saying, that is often accompanied by this peace.
Yeah.
So it's shocking where you have a very traumatic kind of experience, and yet there's peace.
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive, but
Right.
when you see the structure of it, it's really not surprising at all.
And some people are encouraging me, oh, get busy and this and avoid it, but no, I just, it was like wave upon wave for the first couple of weeks, you know. Of, you know, such sadness and gratitude rolling over each other, you know.
Right.
Very profound.
And what is your name?
Felipe.
Felipe. Have we met before, Felipe?
Yeah, I was here about 12 years ago.
12 years ago. What made you rush back?
I haven't really rushed. I used to live in Northern California. I saw you up there as well.
I see.
And I moved to LA a couple of years ago. And so these last 12 years, around that time, I think I got a glimpse of what you talk about, and so the last 12 years have been a kind of struggle of sorts, trying to grasp with why there's this expansion and contraction and all that, and all the drama that's inside that kind of movement. And a couple of days ago, my wife said that we should end our marriage, so that created a lot of emotional pain. And it didn't bring back the expansion or the awareness. It's just a little. So I just thought of, I don't have any friends in LA, so I just wanted to hang out here and perhaps rekindle the connection with your teaching.
Well, you're most welcome.
I really appreciate what you did here. So that's it. I've had questions for these last 12 years, and I think I've gone through all the theory. like intellectually, I've covered everything.
Mhm.
And I think the issue that remains to me is the emotional part, because it feels like a glue. It's like the emotions are very intense, and basically there's nothing one can do. So I think what brought me here today is just as an invitation to be quiet and watch it more than try to fix it or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, when you say that the emotions are kind of like a glue, what did you mean by that? I wasn't clear.
I think I could use the term identification. It's like for all these years, there has been an increasing. The way I put it is like there's an identification with the awareness rather than an identification with the me and my story, my past, and the guilt, as she was saying, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been more and more time, so to speak, identified with this expansion, and then suddenly there is an event that creates all this turmoil of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and the identification, I feel identified with these emotions in the sense that there's basically no release from it.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, it's a rejection of the pain because I want it to go away,
Yes.
and so which is kind of natural in a way, but it has its own drawback because the expansion appears to be lost, so to speak, and all the story behind the pain, so it seems real, and it appears that you've lost what I am. So it's a kind of mental conundrum, you know. If I keep thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
it creates even more suffering. So, but if I manage to be quiet, or if quietness takes place, then everything is kind of resolved. There is no drama in the
Mm-hmm.
story.
What you say is accurate, but your experience over the last 12 years, I'm guessing, is that despite that, there is still the not quiet. There's still the involvement.
Mm-hmm. Involvement.
And what I would call, and this is in this living teaching, there's a real subtle thing that we're pointing to that is kind of underneath this identification. This movement from identifying as the one feeling things to this disidentification as the awareness has often a very dualistic quality, so that you're moving from identification to disidentification to identification to disidentification. What we're pointing at very subtly in this expansion is an expansion that includes this quality of identification, so that the involvement can remain. The emotional feelings, the identity, the memories, the personality remains in the expansion. So we're not having to negate all of that in order for the identity as the totality. That in fact the expansion occurs and includes it. And that's the true non-dual subtle non-dual teaching. That even that movement is part of the unity, the expansion. Now the drawback there is you still have pain. You don't like have that relief of, oh, I'm not the pain, I'm consciousness. You know, I mean, which is when it works is great. The problem is it just doesn't work consistently. It doesn't work as a way out. That's still part of the pendulum, the trap, the game, that we're ultimately pointing beyond in the teaching.
I had a question about pride.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy it?
Enjoy it.
Yeah. Because if it's there, its flip side is going to be coming around any minute, so you might as well enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I guess I was talking a little bit more about the flip side, because I've been feeling the flip side a lot.
Well, of course.
Given my so there it is. I don't quite know what to do with it or about it. I know, but figured maybe if we could just talk it out a bit. I don't know. There'd be some kind of understanding and a click. No. Nothing.
I complain a lot.
You don't what a lot?
I complain.
You don't complain a lot, or
I
you
do.
Oh, yeah.
And I always did.
Uh-huh.
So when I had my moment like you had with your girlfriend, and then like I would be still complaining. The complaining will be there. It's not a thing that will vanish once I get established and the teaching become a living thing for me. So it's kind of a question, like the complaining, it will vanish, or the complaining will be there and there's nothing I can do even.
Who knows how your personality may change with or without the final understanding happening. I mean, people change. I mean, just because you've been a complainer for the last 20 years or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be like that tomorrow. Things change. This sense, death of the sense of authorship that I talk about doesn't inherently change you in any specific way.
For example, do you ever complain sometimes or?
All the time. There is so much shit I don't like. I mean, the list is long. I don't like it. I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like this, I don't like that, I like this, I like that, I like that, I like that. That's me. When I don't get what I want, I complain. When I get what I want, I'm very easy to get along with. That's my nature.
Me too. I'm like this.
Yeah. So that's our nature. We didn't make ourselves this way. The universe has created us this way, to have these particular ways of being.
Yeah, I'm still grasping to believe that something extraordinary. I still have a little bit of this belief that something extraordinary will happen once the final teachings become a living thing for me. Like,
Well, you're right. The suffering will end, which is, I suppose, an extraordinary thing. By ending, I mean that it simply doesn't arise anymore. Now, there's still pain in the moment. There's still stuff you don't like. There's still, unhappiness when you don't get what you want. But it's in the moment. It's here. And then you're on to the next thing. There's no shoulds. No denial of how it is. It simply is. It's this way. I like it this way. I don't like it this way. Whatever's happening at the moment. What's happening in the moment.
so, but do you daydream? Like, do
Do I dream?
Do you daydream?
Daydream? Fantasize? I have a very rich, wonderful fantasy.
But do you still think that if you had a certain thing, it would be cool? Not that you would be happier, but it would be nice, and then you want that,
Sure, I have desires. All kinds of them. Yeah, it'd be nice if I had that. But what is absent is the sense that if I get that, I will be complete. Because there's no incompleteness that requires anything.
Well, in my present experience,
Yes.
I want a lot of things. I complain, I fantasize it. So
Yeah.
But I don't think, for example, that when I get that will be different from where I am right now. I think where I'm gonna be, it's the same thing that I am here. I will have happy moments there or unhappy moments there, even if I get everything that I want.
Well,
so,
you're
but
right.
I still want that.
Yeah.
But I know that being here and being there is kind of the same thing.
Kind of, but not.
Yeah.
Because here is not there. They're different. They're different things.
Because when I moved out from Brazil, and I had a big dream to be living in LA, that was,
Right.
And I thought that
Uh-huh.
I was so happy, perfect. And when I moved here, yes, I was really excited for a few months, and then I realized that,
Yeah.
So every desire that I have right now, I still want it. It's a dream, but for that experience of moving to Brazil to here, I already know that, okay, so there will not be perfection too, as I thought it would be.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about. That if I get that, then it will be perfect. I will be fulfilled. It will be completed. If I get that. That is the difference between desire and the fantasy of the should. If I get that, then I will be okay. My life will be perfect. I will be fulfilled. It will be filled by this. But nothing external can do that. It's great for a couple of months, maybe if you have a really good run. Usually it's shorter than that. So you get a new car, you get a new place, you get a new lover, you get a new this, you get a new that, and they're briefly, it's great. And then it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is this promise that is basically the voice of the self, the sense of authorship. If I get this thing, I will be okay. I will be fulfilled. I will be completed by this thing. And of course, it's a lie. Nothing external has the capacity to do that.
Like even the belief that when I get enlightened, blah,
Same
blah, blah.
same deal. Yeah.
So is the process of making decisions for you now different than it was before? Or like handling inner conflicts, do you even have those?
Yes. Inner conflicts are basically uncertainties that are part of the human condition.
Do you ever feel superior or inferior to others?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you ever feel superior or inferior to others?
Yeah.
But it's kind of just a thought that happens and goes away. You don't actually do nothing, right?
Believe it.
You don't actually believe it. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose there's no inherent sense that that's true. By superior, I have certain qualities that are superior to other people's. I have other qualities which are inferior to other people's. So I have that feeling of superiority and inferiority in regards to specific things, but not as in a generalized sense of being superior or inferior. Specifically, yeah. My state is irrelevant. Truly irrelevant. And what it's going to be like when the enlightenment comes and all of that is a very fun fantasy pastime, but it's there's truly nothing to talk about. I'm telling you, there's nothing to talk about there. The example I use is that this is the absence of something. It is the absence of this sense of independence, of being an independent entity. It's absent. It's the absence of suffering. The thing about an absence is there's no experience of it. Like today, you've walked around all day without a stone in your shoe, right? Okay. So, how has it been? Tell me, what has your experience been of the absence of the stone?
I don't know. I don't think I have ever a stone in my.
You've never had a stone in your shoe in your whole life?
I might have, but I don't remember it. Oh, I didn't like it probably.
Right, but what is your experience today of the absence of the stone bit?
It's good. I mean,
You've thought about the fact that it's been pretty good today? You haven't had a stone in your shoe?
I didn't think of.
So you haven't had any experience of the absence of the stone.
No.
The stone's been absent. There's no stone.
Yeah.
Now, if you went into a room full of people who had stones in their shoe, and then they said, "You see this girl over there? She doesn't have a. She's been walking around all day without a stone in her shoe." And everybody would come to you and say, "Tell us about it. Tell us about your day. What has it been like to have walked around all day without a stone in your shoe? I mean, has it been like bliss?" Everybody calls it bliss, right? It's been the absence of this horrible situation that I'm in. You don't have it. You haven't had it all day. You see? Now, if you have a stone in your shoe and you take it out, and if you take it out and you start walking, you go, "Ah, this is good. This is really, really great." Because in that moment, there is the presence of the absence.
Till I get used to it.
Very quickly, that's gone. And then there's the absence is still there, but there is no experience of the absence. So what we're talking about is the absence of the suffering, the absence of the sense of being an independent authoring entity. It's absent, but it isn't replaced by something, by spacious awareness of being the awareness. That is not replacing it. It is simply absent. And that's why when all the questions, what's it like? What is your experience of the day? My experience of the day has to do with what's present.
Thanks.